My name is Stephen Moore and I'm the presenter of the Your Law Firm Success podcast. This podcast explores the routes to law firm success. We chat to those who have done it, those who are doing it, and those who help law firms do it. This podcast is brought to you by MLT Digital, the leaders in law firm success. So in today's edition of the Your Law Firm Success podcast, we are talking to Stephen Gold. Stephen Gold was probably one of the most successful lawyers that I know. Stephen covers the reasons for his law firm success, as well as sharing some stories and ideas around his work subsequent to that, in which he works with law firms all over the UK, helping them to become more successful. So Stephen, nice to see you. Thank you for coming on today.
It's a pleasure.
As you know, this is a podcast about your law firm success, and you achieved that both as a lawyer, and you've also helped many firms achieve law firm success in the role that you perform now as a law firm, as a consultant to lawyers. I was hoping that what we could do before going into that and what you see as being the pillars of success is if we could have a chat about your history. I know it might seem prehistoric now, or maybe it's like looking in the past, but I'm sure
it's well before prehistoric.
To talk a bit about your past, because you'll be suitably bashful, I imagine, in terms of what you actually did achieve, but what you did achieve was fairly remarkable, and the name of your firm and your name became very, very strongly related with, to a certain extent, disruption, but innovation and growth and sales and strategy. So perhaps we could start on that, Stephen, with a brief history.
With a brief history. All right. Well, I trained in Glasgow. I became a partner in a firm in Glasgow. And then I decided to set up on my own. And in the middle of the plans for doing that, I got diagnosed with cancer and I was off the road for about a year, which was an interesting experience. I'll put it that. Not one I'm over keen to repeat, but an interesting experience. And we opened in a small office on the southwest of Glasgow. Me, my wife, my mother-in-law, who was a trained bookkeeper doing our books, and one secretary. So that was the empire. And my idea at the time was to have a family law firm. To have a high street family law firm. That was my. I wouldn't even dignify it with the word vision. That was my intention. And we did well, actually. We prospered, and we began to get work, well out with our own geographical area. And then I acquired a remarkably gifted guy called Jonathan Edwards as a partner who became and still is my best friend. And among Jonathan's many skills is he is an absolute genius at the application of IT. And it was his vision, not mine to begin with, to apply IT to legal services and to look at how legal services could be commoditized to a degree, how processes could be standardized, how we could reduce cost. And it just coincided with a moment in time where large finance institutions, banks, building societies, and other finance houses began to look really closely at how they delivered their products and services to their customers and how they used lawyers in relation to that. So if you take, for example, something which was an important service for us, remortgage, where in the old days, if you wanted to transfer your mortgage from lender A to lender B, then your solicitor was usually on the panel of the new lender. So your solicitor acted for the lender. That was fine. But from your point of view, but from the lender's point of view, it wasn't fine because they had almost no control on the quality of the service that you delivered. how quick it was, what price you charged, the consistency of quality. And so they began to develop a strategy of saying to a small number of law firms, if you have got the capability to handle this, then we will give you tens of thousands of cases to handle. We will use the legal service as a sales aid in our product. We will say to our customer base, if you take your mortgage with us, we will give you the legal fees we'll give you the legal service for nothing to get that done. But a condition of that is you have to use our appointed firms. And originally that was very big in England. And the breakthrough for us came when, thanks, largely to Jonathan, we developed the ability to provide that service. And I then made the links with the law firms in England who were already, substantial in this market, and said to them, why don't you use us as your Scottish end? And it kind of grew from there. And to cut a very long story short, we became the market leaders in Scotland on the back over a period of, a small period of number of years. And we developed a range of services in retail finance, in commercial finance, in insurance, in debt recovery, and a number of other things. And in the end, it wasn't just banks and building societies and similar. It was large consumer organizations who were offering products to their customers and wanted a similar service where they could have a service level agreement with a firm to deliver a service at a certain price. I should be candid and say that we made one big mistake in what was a very successful ride overall, which was we tried to apply the same principles to conveyancing, and we came a cropper on that. It just didn't fit. It's far too individual a service, and I'm trying to impose systems and processes on it. Yes, there are aspects of the process which you can definitely make more efficient, but overall, everybody's different. There's little uniformity between one client and another, and that didn't go well. And we came out of that. We learned a lesson. We came out of it. And that's what happens when you're trying to do new things. Sometimes you succeed and sometimes you fail. But the growth really happened when we got to a point where the technology side of the business was going incredibly well. And alongside that, we had a conventional business of private client, of some commercial, of property work. And it was clear that while we had the opportunity to have market leadership and, really big expansion in all the technology and commoditized, technology-led and commoditized work, we were never going to be anything more than second or third division in the other stuff. And it was taking a lot of resource, which could have been applied to the first part of the business, what had become the larger part of the business. And so we took a very deep breath and got rid of all the what I would call the conventional work, which was a painful and difficult process because, you make relationships with people and there were quite a number of businesses we acted for a long time and did a lot of work for who were, we were upset to lose them, and they were very upset that we made this decision, but we looked after them. And it was 100% the right decision because it allowed us to focus on what we were really good at. And it freed up capital to allow us to invest in technology and systems and people.
Yeah.
And I think the business, in one sort of mad period, the business more than trebled in a small number of years. We just got caught the wind of what was happening in the marketplace. And so one thing I always say to my clients when I'm consulting with them, and we're looking at creating successful strategies for them, is to really ask yourself the question, what market do you want to be in? It's always said, and I think it's true, that there are two main strategic questions always. Where do we play and how do we win? Where do we play? What markets do we want to be in? That can be by subject, by geography, on a whole number of criteria. But to be really clear who your ideal clients are, who is it you want to serve? There are a lot of firms who do work because, quote, it keeps the lights on. And ultimately, it doesn't keep the lights on. It just results in the lights burning dimmer and dimmer in a more dilapidated building. And if you look at the success of the firms that have really made a success, from the largest to the most niche, you find they all have this in common. They have been quite clear about who they are and what they want to serve.
Okay, so
and it's been the engine of their success.
I was going to ask you about that, in that you described the success of Golds. Was it in retrospect that you were able to draw that line between the way you'd approach things and success in finding where you play through the experience or the negative experience around also carving off the more traditional aspects of the firm?
Well, I don't think it was retrospect. I think it became obvious that the more conventional work was taking time and resource and capital away from the other side of the business, which had and was, if we tried to keep it going, we risked falling between two stools of never building a great conventional practice and limiting our potential on the other stuff. We took that decision. As I say, it was a hard decision. You fight really hard for clients and to win clients, and we had some very good ones. And nobody likes to give them up, but that was the right decision. I don't think we realized quite how right it was. I suppose that's an aspect of looking back on it. I don't think and we were, no matter what, we are fond of thinking that every piece of success we've gained is to do with our merit and our talent and our hard work. But there's quite a lot of luck in it involved as well. We actually, this was at a time when retail and commercial finance was going through an absolute revolution. It was the madness that ultimately resulted in the crash. And undoubtedly, we got a lot of benefit from that. When the banks were lending like there was no tomorrow.
Yeah, I remember that, and I remember that period. And your role, because there's a few things that have come out of that. Your role for the firm at that time, as it was growing, were you doing any legal work?
My role was no, none. I mean, I gave up doing legal work after. Golds lasted about 25 years from the moment we set up to the moment we merged, and I only did client work for the first couple of years, I think. After that, I just realized I was a lot better at making relationships and winning business, and that's why I enjoyed far more, candidly, than doing it. I take utmost respect for people in the profession, which is the majority of them, I guess, who get satisfaction out of the legal work itself. But that wasn't. That didn't do it for me in the same way that being out in the marketplace and competing and bringing in the business did it.
The second thing that I was going to ask, because that's been common around the discussions that we've had to date, is those who have been successful have been able to separate themselves from the tools. Not in all cases, obviously, absolutely, but people recognise their skill set. The second thing that we talk to firms quite a lot about is understanding which types of work they don't want to have. And as you referred to that earlier, as about keeping the lights on, but actually it just leads to the sort of gradual reduction in light or the less likelihood that that's going to continue with any vigor. So
yeah,
you mentioned that the understanding where you play, where you fit, was extremely important. Is that part of a broader picture? Because I know you're very strong on 2 pillars for success for law firms, and obviously all we want to do with this podcast is help law firms become more successful. So
yeah, I think one thing I learned early on was that whether or not you win work is not particularly dependent on you being stellar technically. In the end, clients accept as a starting proposition that you know what you're doing. Clients don't. Let me rephrase that. It's vanishingly difficult to win work on the basis of saying that I am the best litigator, or I am the best conveyancer, or I'm the best corporate lawyer, or whatever. It's impossible to prove it. And as long as you are self-evidently good enough to do the job at the required quality for the client, whether you might be marginally technically better than the firm down the road is not that important. Clients aren't that interested. Clients want to be satisfied that you have the fundamental competence to do the job. But once they are satisfied about that, what counts is 2 things. One is the service that you give them, by which I mean how responsive you are, how accessible you are, how likable you are, and easy to get on with. Because what people are looking for most of the time is not only a service but a relationship. They want to feel that they have a trusted advisor in their corner who is good to talk to, has got a real understanding of what their issues are, is clued up on the marketplace that they're in, or the kind of circumstances, or if it's private clients and the kind of circumstances in which they find themselves, whether it's matrimonial, whether it's executory, whatever it is. So service and relationship are the twin pillars on which business is won, in my experience. Of course, it matters that you can deliver, that you can keep your promises technically. And there are a number of them about, lawyers who are technically very good, but lack emotional intelligence or lack ability to make good relationships, don't prosper to anything like the extent that they should.
I think that's part of being in a team. And it sounds as if you discussed that with Jonathan, and that, I've met Jonathan before, and I could see you going out and doing the sales stuff without any doubt, and building the relationship, seeing that as being key role. I would have been less sure about that. And I don't know if that's true or not. You can tell.
No, I think that's probably a bit unfair. I mean, and to be, Jonathan's gone on and built a really successful, firm independently. So I'm not sure I would say that, but I think he would probably say that he's more comfortable in other roles other than the selling function, whereas I'm the reverse. So it takes a team. We can't all football. You were talking just before we went on air about taking your son to the football. If this team comprised 11 centre forwards, they wouldn't win many games.
No, they certainly wouldn't. And building a team is extremely important, and understanding the different skills that are there, but understanding the importance of sales and building relationships for a firm. And if you're not bringing business in, then you're not going to get anywhere.
No, that's absolutely. Absolutely. And I think it's sometimes underrated. The ability to win work is a different skill. And having done both, because I was a practitioner for a bit, I think winning it is a lot harder than doing it. I'm not saying that doing it is easy, because there's complexity, and there's deadlines, and there's demanding clients, and there's regulation, and general hassle and aggravation around it, some stress around it quite a lot of the time. So I don't say for a moment that it's easy. But if you have spent the time acquiring a skill, then to practice that skill is in your comfort zone. And as a practitioner, in a solicitor-client relationship, as the solicitor, you have a degree of status and authority. You're the expert. You're deferred to a degree. And you have a technical grasp, so you're able to, give the advice. If you're pitching for work, you're a supplicant. You have no status. So, certainly no more than the person you're pitching to wants, wishes to give you. You can go up or down their agenda at their whim. They can say yes, they can say no for good reason, for poor reasons, for no reason at all. Rejection, even for the most successful rainmakers, is a part of life, and that's hard. Lawyers are, if you scratch the surface of the average solicitor, then I think you find somebody who is analytical, suspicious, maybe quite reserved in their dealings a lot of the time, risk averse, petrified of personal failure. And these are all fantastic qualities for keeping clients out of trouble and solving complex problems. But you probably wouldn't find Richard Branson describing himself that way. They're not the skills and qualities required to sell what you're offering. And the personal rejection point, I think, is a really important one. People are often loath to put themselves out there because of the risk of rejection. I've come, when I've dealt with, it's been a privilege. I've dealt with firms worked with firms now from global giants to small local practices, and you would be amazed how many people in the global giants who you think would just ooze self-confidence are very weary of putting themselves in harm's way of risking a no. So it's a big barrier, and you need to be resilient.
But when you are working with firms and you're, as you do a lot, helping them grow, do you raise the issue if you feel that the partners are maybe not capable of going out and doing this bit of the job?
A good number of times I've been asked to come in and help with exactly that, because people know that selling has been my background, and because I'm a lawyer, hopefully I talk their language to understand their world, and people have asked me to mentor and to coach, and that's a very satisfying part of the job when it goes well. And it's about honesty. Firms also, the culture in many firms doesn't help, because you often have firm leaders saying, we want our people to be out there selling and to be, constantly bringing in the business. But often their firms have a culture where if you're not billing, then you're not contributing. Yeah. And a lot of business development activity is of necessity speculative. So it involves spending time, which otherwise you might have spent, racking up 6 million units on meetings and seminars and lunches and, content for the website, and any number of other activities which are essential if you're going to sell, but don't always pay off, or don't always pay off quickly. And people get very concerned that they, and ask themselves the question, I could be sitting at my desk doing work which is on my desk, and I get paid for that, and I'm comfortable doing it. If I go and pursue a client, then I'm spending time that is not chargeable, that I don't get any credit for if all goes wrong, or if it doesn't, not if all goes wrong, but if it doesn't succeed. So, why should I do that? So firm leaders have got a fundamental obligation to create an atmosphere where these questions don't get asked, where they're entitled to say to their people, we expect you to use your time thoughtfully and not to pursue, not to go on wild goose chases, and not to be profligate with the firm's time and resources, but equally to make it clear that not to succeed when you've made a good faith attempt at what seemed a reasonable prospect is not going to be punished. That the firm will allow you sufficient time to engage in BD activity, and it will allow you the time for that activity to pay off. Now, these are, it's easy for me to stay here and say this when, a managing partner would say to me, well, these are very expensive people and they need to pay their way. And, yes, they do. But there's got to be a sensible balance between what's built in the here and now, and what activity will ensure the firm's got a flow of work well into the future. To kind of sort of really corny cliche, if you don't sow the seed, you don't get the fruit.
It's a really, and I know we could talk about a range of other things, but I think that one is extremely important. And I know you're very keen on culture, but it's having a growth mindset and an understanding, as you say, that if you're spending your whole time doing on the tools, then you can't be spending time out building relationships. And that's really what's going to give the business the strength and the resource to grow. And do you have a benchmark, for example, in terms of how much time you believe should be spent on BD by the appropriate partners or staff within a firm in order to return success?
I've never thought of it in terms of a percentage. What I would say is that if you're committed to developing your practice, that how hard it is to say it, normal office hours don't apply. That to a degree, you've got to put your body on the line. I spent, I wasn't on the tools, but nevertheless, I spent, vast amounts of time on trains and boats and planes, and going to going to places far and wide and coming back, very late at night and very early mornings, and 7 days a week, and that went on for a very long time, and I don't necessarily recommend it if it's not what you feel you want to do. But I think it's a truism that if you want to be a serious developer of work in professional services, that if you take the time required to actually think about what you're going to do and put it all together and then implement it, that's a big task. And I don't think it can be done I don't think it can be rammed into a small space between the last telephone call and the next email during the course of a working day. I think you need to create time and space to think about what you're going to do, I also think you need good support. Lawyers are, in the end, the service has got to be sold by the lawyers because they're providing it. They're providing the service. We're unusual in this respect. If you were to, look at many other sectors of commerce and industry, there's a manufacturing team, and there's an administrative team, and there's a sales team. And they've all got dedicated tasks, and hopefully they all knit together. Lawyers who have got ambitions to build their practice have got to be, on this, have got to juggle this dilemma of finding the time to build the work that they need to do to continue to perform as the firm expects, and also to make the time to develop new work, and that means that significant amounts of what might otherwise be private time or leisure time gets eaten into, and you have to kind of make that bargain with yourself if you're going to do it properly.
Sorry, I've just been distracted. My dog.
I don't criticize people who. I don't criticize people who say, "Do you know what? I'm not doing that." That's a perfectly reasonable thing for somebody to say, but they have to accept the consequences of the limitations that might place on them.
I think everybody's got a choice to make, and particularly now in the post-pandemic working arena, it's more difficult, I think, for younger people to understand. I think that maybe the sacrifices that somebody like you would have made in terms of family life in order to grow your firm, but to reap the rewards that you have now. But at the same token, maybe there's some opportunity around growing an understanding that there are certain people who become lawyers who actually are very keen to go out and build relationships and talk, and are able to demonstrate sufficient expertise that they can talk about it and gain trust and authority without ultimately being the one that's actually going to deliver the service. Yeah.
That was the case with me, and I think it's the case with. I'm certainly come across that a lot. Clients are intelligent. They understand that different people in a law firm have different functions, and they don't expect necessarily the most senior people to always do their work. And fundamentally, they didn't want to pay for it either unless it really merits it.
Yeah. And I think, because I think we could talk, because there's so much, Stephen, you've got so much knowledge, but to be concise on this matter, it's really some key aspects of success. One, knowing your market, knowing where you play, as you described it, relationships.
I think you might think this is odd to recommend. The former CEO of Procter & Gamble, a man called A.G. Lafley, wrote a book called Playing to Win with academic and consultant Roger Martin, and it was basically the story of Procter & Gamble, and it was them who came up with the two key this expression of the two key questions: where do we play and how do we win? And there are subsidiary questions which, once you've decided that, there are subsidiary questions such as what resources do we need to achieve our ambitions? What systems do we have to have in place? What constraints do we have, and how do we overcome them? And the success of P&G under his management and leadership was because they identified these questions and then successfully went about answering them.
And so, well, I'll definitely buy that and I'll read that. But just to bring that back, so these top two areas, but really you need to build the relationships and need to provide time and understanding and a culture within the practice that supports the importance of business development versus technical activity. and that you are able to ensure that once the business is in, that the service is developed to such an extent that it satisfies the client. It, as you say, it doesn't need to be the best service in the world. It just has to meet the requirements.
Yep. Which might be very high. It's not in any way. I'm not in any way, minimizing the need to be, good enough technically. What I'm saying is that clients are not really able to, and are not really interested in comparing the absolute technical expertise of one firm as against another. What they are concerned to be happy about is that their lawyers are good enough.
Yeah,
have got the skills. After that, I was given a statistic a long time ago, and I can't give you an unimpeachable source for its correctness, but it sounds right to me that as human beings we make 84% of our decisions emotionally and 16% analytically. And as I say, I can't prove that to you. Maybe there may be a source, but that feels right to me. I've presented innumerable tenders, and I've helped clients in tender exercises as well. And of course, in a tender, there's a spreadsheet with all sorts of criteria on it, and which are meticulously gone through and ticked off. But underneath it all, the clients are asking, can I bear to be stuck in a lift with this guy for an hour?
Okay.
How much do I really relate? There's a book. If people are listening to this, there's a really good book called Perfect Pitch by a man called John Steele. You read Perfect Pitch, yeah. So, well, you'll know the story that that he was asked to be part of a panel. Apple was a client of his, and Apple were tendering for a certain service, and he was asked to be on their procurement panel. And he said that they set aside a day. There was a bunch of providers to come in and pitch to them, and every single one had banks of slides and elaborate promises and bells and whistles. And he said, we got to the end of the day with one to go, and he said he felt the only thing that would be better than the day he had was a heart attack. And the last person came in and it wasn't, whereas everybody else had sent in teams of high-powered people, this one man carrying a small briefcase. He came in and sat down and said, look, there are some things in what you're asking which we definitely can't provide, but there are some things which we can, and we're really good at it. Now, do you think we could have a conversation? I haven't brought any slides with me. Can we just talk? And Steele says in the book, he says, we could have kissed him. He walked away with a huge amount of work, and so because he had the emotional intelligence to understand what it took to connect at a human level, and was able and having done that, was able to demonstrate that he knew what he was doing.
You're still doing work with law firms.
Yeah.
So, assuming someone listens to this, who where can people find you?
I have a website developed by an excellent technology company.
Yeah. So is it stephengold.co.uk?
So stephengold.co.uk, yeah.
And you can find you on LinkedIn.
Find me on LinkedIn. I live in London now, but I still travel a bit for work outside London. So yeah.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Stephen. That was brilliant. I think we could probably cover. I feel like we've only just scratched the surface, but I'm also hoping, and I think that we've got some very key lessons there, particularly around the time spent doing business development. We could go into the others around
Okay.
strategy, culture, etc. in the future, but I think that one is really, really important for firms to understand. So thank you very, very much.
You're welcome. Good to see you.
And you. Cheers. Speak to you later. Bye.
All the best.
Bye.
Bye now.
So thanks very much for listening to today's episode. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you're enjoying our content. We'd be delighted to hear any feedback that you have. You can find out more about the Your Law Firm Success podcast at mltdigital.co.uk/podcast. Please subscribe. Please share with your friends. Please share with anyone who you know that you think would be interested.